It's tough for a lot of people to hear that word and not be frightened, you know? And that's sad to say, because there are so many of us out there, 1 in 100, and for all those people, are they just a schizophrenic? Can you just throw them all into that one pile and describe them all as, you know, violent people who really have no control? But that's not true. We have control. It's really sad to see what the world has kind of portrayed schizophrenics as, when there are ones quite like myself that are somewhat high functioning, and I mean, I can kind of say that about myself. I think I'm pretty high functioning for my illness, for the things that I have to go through on a day-to-day basis. You know, it gets really tough sometimes, but you know, I get through the day, and at the end of it, I'm still the same person that everyone else sees me as, but inside there's this whole other side of me that no one sees, and it's really difficult sometimes. But
so can we talk about the inside part? So, because what we see on the outside is a handsome, young, capable man.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to talk about the inside part. So what is your world like internally, John?
It's kind of a loaded question. It's tough, you know. I've dealt a lot with voices telling me things about myself that I know aren't true. However, there are many people, I'm sure, that just take the voices, take what the voices are saying at face value. This is how I'm going to live my life. However, for me, I've spent a lot of time fighting off these voices telling me, you know, that it's really difficult to give examples just because it's so personal, right?
Can you give us a picture of what that's like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think a pretty good place to start would be from where I started back when I was about 19 years old, and I first started having hallucinations. Actually, well, it kind of started when I was 17. I started smoking pot and I skipped class, so marijuana definitely played a big role in the onset, I think, for me. I would skip class, and when I did show up, I would often show up stoned, and I would hear the other kids talking about me, and I could hear them saying, "Oh, he's so high," right? And so that kind of led on into my later years, a couple years later, when I was diagnosed with psychosis. So they didn't really call it schizophrenia. I didn't even know what schizophrenia was back in the day, really. I would hear people talking about me, and I often thought that I was the center of attention. In everyone's mind, I often thought that people could see inside my thoughts, they could see in my brain, they knew what I was thinking, and I could communicate with other people via my thoughts, and I would hear them talking back to me, and it was quite frightening for a while.
What does a hallucination mean to you as somebody who lives with them?
Could be anything from seeing signs in the media, seeing license plates. I often see license plates. Letters and numbers are representations of words. However, there's also the signs in media, and it's often quite alarming because it's major, and I often feel responsible. Like, there'll be something that appears on the television, and I'll find myself apologizing for it. Like, "Oh, sorry, yeah, that's just me, that's just my brain, yeah, sorry, I'm the one that's you know, causing those sprinklers to go off during that tennis match because I'm having a rough day." And you know, it's gotten to the point where it's very hard to discern reality from the hallucinations, because sometimes the news will turn on in the morning for my alarm, and I'll hear something that I was thinking about the night before, and it'll pop up.
I just can't imagine. I mean, it's, as you said, we all have voices in our head. You know, if you're stressed, if you're upset, I just can't imagine what it would feel like to have multiple voices yelling at you and telling you what to do. I can't imagine.
One time, this is actually about 3 months ago, they told me that there was, I think it was like around 1,000 people in my head, and that my whole high school graduated class was watching me, and that they were in, and I could hear all the voices of all the different people, and you know, it was freaking scary. Freaking scary.
Absolutely. And how do you deal with that, John?
One day at a time. One day at a time. You just have to take it one day at a time, 1 minute at a time sometimes. There have been so many times when I've just wanted to give up and just end it all, drive myself off a cliff, jump off a bridge. I've thought about it all, but there's just this driving force that keeps me going. Like, I know I can get through this. I'm not gonna let this shit beat me. Pardon my French. I'm not gonna let it beat me. And it's come to the point where it's very difficult to have to deal with this stuff on a day-to-day basis, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it makes me really sad to hear you say, you know, how bad it can be, that sometimes it would just be easier to end it. But I appreciate you sharing that, and it's not an easy thing to talk about.
No, absolutely not.
It's really not an easy thing, but it's important that we talk about it. And John, I hope you know that you're not alone. You know, as you said before, 1 out of 100 people have schizophrenia. 1 out of 100.
You know, I actually read a statistic the other day that only 1 in 5 people with mental health disorders actually get the treatment that they need. And that's ridiculous.
You said that you're on medication and that medication has helped you. So tell us about your treatment journey.
Medication is a godsend for me, personally. It has been. I've tried a lot of stuff that hasn't worked for me. It was an awful medication. It basically knocked me out. I would eat, you know, an entire box of Oreos a day. I wound up gaining like 70 or 80 pounds, and it was a really, really crappy time in my life. I was just sedated and not, it wasn't a good medication for me, and it really didn't, it helped with the symptoms, but only because I was so sedated that I couldn't function. And I would just sit around my house all day, you know, and eat Oreos. And it just made me miserable, just because I didn't feel like a human being. I didn't feel like I was able to function, you know, on a daily basis. I couldn't take care of the things that needed to be taken care of. I couldn't function. But I used to take an ADHD medication, which helped me for a while, and I wound up, I actually, with my journey back when I was 19, I stopped taking much of my medications, and I was in rough shape for quite a while, but I had something that kind of woke me up to the fact that, you know, you need to be taking something, man, because this isn't working out for you.
And what about a support system? Do you have people to talk to? Do you feel supported?
Absolutely. I have an amazing support group around me. I have lots of friends. I got neighbors who are just so, I don't know where I would be without them. And fantastic family. My parents have been really supportive of me through it all, even though they have no idea. They'll listen, and they'll give their input. They'll tell me what they know or what they think is the right thing to do in the moment. But really, it's really difficult for the average person to understand what I go through on a day-to-day basis. So if you see someone who may be suffering from mental illness and who you think needs help, please take the time to reach out to them, ask them what's going on, and see if you can seek help for them, because no one should suffer alone. No one should suffer in silence. The stigma surrounding schizophrenia is something that we need to come together as a community and understand that not all schizophrenics are violent. Not all schizophrenics even hear voices. Sometimes it's, hallucinations, or they'll see things, or there are so many different classifications of schizophrenia. But for those people that do hear voices and that do maybe have some different tendencies, they need to, sometimes you just need help. Sometimes you just need to reach out to someone. But that stigma, the stigma surrounding it is just so off. And I just want everyone to know that we're no different than, the average person walking down the street. You can't look at someone and say, oh yeah, they're schizophrenic, just because, they might be mumbling to themselves.
What gives you the courage, John? What gives you the courage to be able to sit here, right here on this bench with me today and have this conversation?
Honestly, I have dealt with a lot of stuff over the years, and I would really love to see a world where the stigma surrounding serious mental illness is no more, and that people will no longer think of schizophrenia as a violent illness. You can't shun people, you can't degrade them based on an illness, because this is curable. It's difficult to say that it's curable, but you can definitely manage the symptoms a lot better if you seek out the help that you require.
You can be treated.
Absolutely.
Through.
You can be treated through, and it's the same with people with addictions, right? The answer isn't always to shun them or to throw them into a facility or anything like that. Sometimes the best option is to try and immerse them back into society and send them into social gatherings, and really just try and reestablish that sense of belonging and a sense of wellness and a sense of community. It's become very difficult for people with serious mental illness to go out there and to talk about it. And I really want to help get the message out there that, you're not alone. You're not alone.
So, what's next for you, John?
I often find myself living so much in the past that it's hard for me to think about my future sometimes. And again, it just comes back to living it one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time, because I don't know where I'm going to be tomorrow. In the future, one thing I do want to do is try and help people with, and I love being here today and sharing my story, because that's part of what I want to do with my future, is help people with maybe some similar experiences, maybe some not so similar experiences.
You're writing a book.
I am writing a book.
Which is incredible to see. This is near the beginning of your book. called Voices in My Head, and you state, "But always remember that your future needs you, but your past doesn't. Let the fleeting thoughts be just that, fleeting. Let them drift away and move on with your day. Nothing good comes from dwelling on the past, and however tempting it may be to look back at the old times, you can't live there, no matter how badly you may want to."
Good advice.
Yeah. "Accept that your past is not indicative of your future, and you have the power to make it so. Change is your friend. Change your thoughts, and the rest will follow."
Thanks, Phaedra. I needed to hear that again.
So what did you mean by that?
Well, there are times from my past where I've made mistakes, and these mistakes have often presented themselves in my voices, and my voices will just scream at me and just endless, like they just will never cut it out. And sometimes they'll repeat the same things over and over and over and over and over, and it gets to the point where it just gets so tiring and so tough to deal with that, I wrote that for myself more than anything else, because I need to hear that, the past isn't always beneficial. Dwelling on things in the past is never beneficial. And there are times where your past may creep up on you and, come scratching at the door. But you can't let that control you. You can't let that get to you. Because again, your future needs you, your past doesn't.
It's very powerful. And that's good advice for anybody. Thanks for sharing that.
There have definitely been some tough times where I felt like giving up.
Where do you get your hope from, John? What gives you hope?
That tomorrow will be better than yesterday, and that I can make it so.
Sad. Thank you.
Growing up, I think I've seen better days. It's getting tough. Always trying to seem like I'm okay. I'm growing up, whatever that means anyway. I don't know enough. I'm just growing up, whatever that means anyway. I don't know enough. Just growing up.
Probably get something out of that, eh?